knowing and all-powerful, starting with the elderly wolf uncle. Chapter 60. The only feeling of powerlessness in this life seemed to suppress all the persistence he had previously put in his heart at this moment. I'm not the strongest, nor the only one. While thinking, Clark rolled over and supported his hands on the ground, unable to get up for a long time. He was not injured or physically exhausted. It is a lack of a heart in my heart that supports me. Stand up, Clark. Are you waste? Chen Tian sensed Clark's emotions. Dazed, lonely, disappointed, the emotions wrapped are actually all anger. As the person who knew the other party's potential best, Chen Tian immediately opened his mouth to provoke the other party. The voice fell. Clark on the opposite side was already clenching his fists. Are you a freak, or waste? Quote. Chen Tian knew that the anger in his heart was getting deeper, and he spoke again. Stand up for me. Ah, get out of my way. Hear it here. Clark only felt a strong emotion, madly churning in the bottom of his heart, raising his head and roaring. His eyes suddenly turned crimson, his neck was bruised, and his fist fingers pressed deeply into the ground. Next moment, the red light in his eyes became more and more dazzling. The surrounding temperature seems to increase, and the endless heat wave sweeps and expands. Crazy rages fill the entire surrounding space. Rumble. 2 crimson beams of light suddenly burst up, straight into the blazing energy of the sky. The crimson pillar of light was like a pillar of light that rushed straight into the sky, completely supporting the entire heaven and earth, and it seemed to occupy half of the sky in a trance. Dye half the sky red. Clark has a complete explosion. Chapter 60. Get Krypton Bloodline. The early combat power performance of the god of the world. Rumble. Endless terrifying energy power erupted, terrifying. Clark only felt that the emotions suppressed to the extreme in his heart, at this time finally found an outlet to vent. The whole person is like a volcano that has been brewing for many years and finally erupted, and the 2 crimson beams are wrapped in terrifying power, from his eyes, straight to the sky. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark. The red beam of light that penetrated the sky was as vast as a long rainbow, and it was impossible to look at it directly. The surrounding sky, which had appeared red in the evening for a few kilometers, was directly reflected in crimson. The sea of clouds was also torn open and turned endlessly. Then, Clark's mood finally calmed down a little, and his heart began to be a little panicked-chaotic. This is the first time he has used heat vision, so he is defenseless against what is happening now. But the beam of light that erupted from his eyes was like a suppressed emotion in his heart, like a torrent. Round of invisible rolling heat waves surged and spread in the air, and the 100 meters around Clark seemed to turn into an oven at this time, and the air was distorted. Combat detected. Rewarded. Heat sight. Superman. Chen Tian also raised his eyebrows when he looked at the foreground, and the voice of receiving a reward immediately sounded in his mind. It's a catch, he murmured, raising an eyebrow at Clark. Chen Tian sensed the other party's pain and doubts, and realized that the latter was using thermal vision for the first time. It seems that his actions just now have finally taken effect, not in vain. Smooth helped Clark force out of potential. Scoff. One by one. The 2 pillars of crimson light that connected heaven and earth finally began to slowly weaken and gradually disappear. The terrifying coercion that filled the surrounding space slowly faded. Clark's eyes darkened, and finally calmed down, and the steam from the corners of his eyes drifted away with the wind. Hot vision. He lowered his eyes, whispered in a deep voice, and began to look back to understand that he had activated another ability. Furthermore, Clark also discovered his own strength, and after experiencing the catharsis just now, he actually gained a terrifying boost again. In his past life, he actually knew that his strength had gradually increased. But there has never been such an exaggerated leap forward at this time. Clark's current state can be described as having risen a step, and it is not an exaggeration. Meanwhile, he raised his palm and obviously found that he was at this time, and he could also sense an invisible force between heaven and earth circulating between his fingers. This is magnetic field. Quote. Clark's eyes lit up. In addition to heat vision and strength improvement, I also feel the presence of a magnetic field. In other words, I can now fly by pulling a magnetic field. Perhaps, now I can. Thoughts are not falling. He raised his head sharply and stared at Chen Tian with a flickering gaze. Next second, rumble. The ground where Clark was originally located exploded into a deep pit. His whole person rushed towards Chen Tian with a strong wind, directly stretched out his big hand to clasp the latter's shoulder, and flew towards the depths of the woods. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Click. 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 Where the 2 figures passed, countless trees were washed away and wood chips flew. Bang bang. During the flight, Clark grabbed Chen Tian's shoulder with one hand, and fisted the latter madly with the other. Fierce and terrifying currents continued to rush out from the places where both sides passed, and all the surrounding trees were shaken by the wind and the leaves were lost. After the enlightenment just now, he was sure that his strength had suddenly risen and jumped above Chen Tian. In addition to developing thermal vision, all the abilities of the whole person have been strengthened, and have they also learned to fly? Chen Tian resisted the surging falling fist and clearly realized this. His expression immediately became exciting, and he secretly marveled in his heart. Clark really deserves to be a great super, just an enlightenment can enhance such a great power. This is his unusual Kryptonian bloodline. It is also worthy of being the first naturally born fetus in Krypton's long history. Combat detected, rewarded, fly, Superman. Combat detected, rewarded, creature stand, Superman. Just when Chen Tian secretly sighed the horror of Clarkton's Kryptonian bloodline, a cold prompt from the ability to copy sounded in his mind again. Flight and biological stand. He felt that he had 2 more abilities, and his eyes lit up. This ability means that you will be freed from the shackles of the earth and completely increase all the upper limits in combat or action. No doubt. The combination of flight and biological stance is one of the most practical abilities for anyone. Clark, you've really surprised me. I just said, directly to you to negotiate, is the best way to maybe be capable. Boom, Chen Tian thought with a smile while blocking Clark's 2 punches falling in succession. However, since I've been letting you fight for so long, now it's my turn to fight back. Next second, Chen Tian's face froze. First chapter previous